Welcome to the With You and For You podcast. Our desire is to equip college-age students within the Edmond, OKC area by discussing topics and questions that are relevant to our generation. With that in mind, thank you for tuning in, and let's get to the show. Welcome back, guys. Today we've got Kyle Thomas, Krista Smith, Tyson Hill, and me, Riley Jackson, as a host on the podcast. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a little under the weather. Got some allergies going on, so sorry if I sound a little gross. So.
Define allergies.
Please
for me.
do.
Allergies,
What are you allergic to right now?
The snow.
Snowing.
You can't even
outside.
say that. You stole that from Tyson.
But I mean, it was funny.
Oh,
so that's why I said it.
Okay. Well, maybe. I don't know. It might be the precipitation. I have no idea. But I sound gross, so I'm sorry about that. Just a little FYI. But how are you guys doing? How's your week been?
It's been good.
It's been good.
Yeah. I don't have
Short.
allergies, so we're doing good.
That's good for you. I'm happy.
I don't have a cold, so
It's not a cold. I promise you. It's not a cold.
Okay.
Whatever. All right. Fine. Okay.
Tyson, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm just over here chilling.
Like it.
Chilling.
That's it.
Wow. Good for you, man. I'm happy for you. All right. So kind of just jumping right into it. This week we're going to be talking about servanthood and just kind of what that means. So starting off with like the first question, like what is servanthood? Like what would you define it as?
Long pause.
Crickets. Golly.
Thought Krista was going to hop in there and
You
answer.
were going to. Last time we
Great
went
job,
in like
guys.
an order.
I looked at you and you just sat there. I mean, when I think of servanthood, I think of Mark 10:45, where Jesus, it shows us that Jesus came to serve, not to be served. And he really just, through his life, I mean, you just see kind of how he continues to serve for the sake of acknowledging, glorifying his Father, and also just fulfilling the mission that he had to come and then end up being a perfect sacrifice for us. And so I think it's just those people that you don't necessarily see, all the time, like they're behind the scenes, or they do things without recognition or acknowledgement, and they just do it because it's like, hey, this needs to be done. I'm faithfully walking with the Lord. Like I see the need, so I'm going to meet it. Rather than, oh, hey, I see the need. Hey, somebody else. Hey, could somebody else go, do this? So I think that's kind of when I think of servanthood, just those types of things, serving that way without really kind of wanting anything in return.
I get that. Yeah. So kind of like a follow-up question to that. Like, so what's the pull to serve? Like, why do we need to do that? What's the desire there?
Can I take this one?
No, you're not allowed.
I would say kind of like the pull to it is, one, obviously, like just in serving others, like you are displaying the gospel, kind of like what Kyle was talking about, just and how Jesus came to not be served, but to serve. And in that way, just displaying what a Christ-like life looks like in service. And I think it's also cool, kind of also what Kyle was saying, just like showing up on Thursday nights and everyone just kind of doing what they know how to do, what they know, like, how am I trying to say this? Doing what they do best. That's what I'm trying to say.
Doing what they do. Yes.
But, I mean, they know. Like, I mean, we have a lot of people that are, musically gifted, and they know that they do really well at that, and so they're going to use those gifts to serve in that way. And I also think that's just a cool way, again, just of showing the gospel and how they are using their gifts to bring glory to the Lord in everything that they do. So I think the pull is to share the gospel. And also, I think when the Lord gives you gifts and you recognize that, like, you also have a passion for those things. And I mean, finding an outlet to use your gifts to serve is just a really great pull for that too. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
So this is something I've kind of been pondering too. Do you think somebody is like gifted with the spiritual gift of like service and like having the heart to do that, or do you think that like that's something that everybody has as like a Christian?
I think it's something that like all of us as believers should develop if we don't have. I mean, it's kind of hard because I think there are naturally people that enjoy serving others. Kind of like there are people that enjoy like on Christmas morning watching everyone open their gifts. They're like, hey, I'm fine with opening my gifts. Like I'm excited about it. I look forward to it. But I really get excited about watching other people, just seeing the joy and the happiness on their face of opening the gifts and things. So I think there is that. Like there are people that they enjoy serving, they enjoy helping, they enjoy meeting that need. But as believers, like we are all called to serve. And that's where, again, I mean, Mark 10 kind of comes in and tells us that, like, because Jesus came to serve and not to be served, we, as we live in obedience to him and we try to glorify him and pursue him, like we need to take up the call to serve as well. Yeah. But for some of us, that, I mean, it can look different in how we serve and in what ways we serve. And that doesn't mean that every time we're serving or doing something or showing up early to set up chairs for Sunday morning church or something like that, like we're going to be amped up and excited, like, yes, I'm so stoked about doing this. But it could just be like, hey, like, I need to do this. Like there's a need. I need to meet it. Yeah. So that's what I would kind of say with that.
Yeah. Coming off of this, like, how do you serve well? Like what does that look like within the Christian community and like and just being a Christian in general? Like how do you serve well and how do you do that?
So can I talk now? I guess. Yeah. I think that serving well, it starts with being obedient to what God's telling you to do. So it starts with that first, of like listening to what the Lord is telling you to do, and then also just like being open to like seeing what's happening in the space around you. So looking for those opportunities to serve, and then being bold enough to actually do them, and then also just asking for those opportunities to serve. We've talked about prayer a lot around here, and like if we ask the Lord for things that we know he'll give us, then he's going to give it to us. So if we ask the Lord for opportunities to serve, he's going to give us those opportunities to serve.
Yeah, and I would say, I was thinking about this because Thursday night we talked about gifts and spiritual gifts and everything. And as I was driving home, I was thinking about it. I was like, man, I didn't say it, and I don't even know if I had it in my notes, but I just thought about it. Like a lot of times if we see a need, like if there is a need that's impressing your heart, that could be the Lord, giving you that opportunity that's saying, hey, this is where I want you to serve. This is what I want you to kind of take this first step in, rather than being like, oh, hey, here's this need. Like, I'm going to try and get somebody else to do it. It's like, oh, wait, like I have a need for, homeless people in OKC. Like, well, then maybe the Lord's looking for you to partner with some ministries that reach out to homeless people, like, or doing those types of things. And so really just being open and inclined to the Lord's leading in those areas. And even if you're sitting there and you're saying, hey, the Lord, I haven't feel him like press this upon my heart or lead me in this way, then maybe it's just starting with your church and being like, I'm going to start looking at different areas I can serve in and find out really what, I'm enjoying. Now that doesn't take away again from setting up tables or chairs or things like that, but it could be like, hey, if I'm going to serve in the kids ministry and I'm going to serve in the youth ministry and I'm going to serve maybe helping out with a Sunday school class or different things. And then you find maybe that niche of, oh man, I really enjoy serving in this way. But ultimately, God calls us to serve, not just to participate in a ministry or in a church. He wants us to be a part of the body because he's gifted us to bring these things to the table that complete that unity and that community that we see in Scripture. Yeah.
Now, what would you say for like the new believer and the new believer that wants to go and serve, but they don't know like where to start? What would you say like is their first steps?
Well, I was going to say this on the last one and it'll tie in, but I think for like another way to serve well is to invite people to serve with you. And I think as mature believers, I mean, those that you're discipling and those that are new believers, inviting them into that is really, really important. Even if it is just, hey, we're going to set up tables and chairs for free lunch on Wednesday, and you inviting them to meet you at the BCM building to, set up those tables and chairs with you. Just like such a simple thing. But with new believers, I genuinely believe, like finding a church and just serving in it and finding your gifts in it. And I think a lot of conversations that happened, from Thursday night talking about gifts, like I talked to some girls and they were like, I don't know what my gifts are. And I was like, well, where are you serving at? Because that's truly how I believe you find your gifts. And so you could start off serving in kids ministry and be like, this is not my jam. Then you could go to youth. Or I also think, also just as new believers develop their relationship with the Lord, and as they begin to, have their quiet time and things like that, kind of like what Kyle's talking about, the Lord's going to reveal needs to them that they see as they continue on, like in reading his word and just reading about the Great Commission and just seeing those needs around them, and how the Lord's going to shape their minds and shape just their worldview to see the needs around them, just as they get plugged into a church, continue to have a quiet time, and as they begin to just serve in random areas until they kind of find like their fit. So that's what I would say.
I also would say that I think that like for the new Christians out there, like there is some timidity behind serving in a church, or even getting plugged into a church as a new Christian. So I think like those who have like brought them to Christ should bring them to their church and stuff like that. But also I think like, man, for those who are discipling them and for the new Christians, like they should really pray for that boldness to serve. Because like she said, like we may not find the area that we enjoy serving the first time we serve, but it's still fruitful to serve the Lord no matter where we are. And so even if it's not the perfect place the first time around, like there's still fruit that's being like built through that.
Yeah, and I think finding like just having those trusted people, as Krista kind of mentioned, maybe that person that's investing in you or discipling you, or the accountability partner that kind of knows you well, and just being like, hey, I don't know if that really fits, like what you're trying to do. Because at least in my time in ministry, I know I've probably done this, somebody comes up and talks to me like, hey, I really want to do this thing, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd be awesome. And then it can just kind of fall short just because there's not a lot of maybe just development and foundation there. And I just like, oh yeah, just, hey, go ahead and run with it. And so sometimes even with the best intentions, people in ministry, ministers, pastors, that kind of stuff, we can be like, yeah, we'd love to have you do this thing, without maybe the foundation that's in place to really make it as successful as it could potentially be. And so if you're a new believer, you're trying to find out, hey, where should I start serving? What should I do? I would just reach out to those people that are like, hey, these are the people I trust that I know aren't going to just tell me this thing. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, you need to be on stage speaking every week. But it could be like, hey, like, yeah, you should come and start just sharing your testimony, with a few of our international students, or just investing in those types of things. So having those people that can speak that truth into your life, that aren't just going to tell you what you want to hear, but aren't just going to tell you also like what they want you to do for them, is, I think, really important.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. Now, like, okay, kind of like turning the page a little bit on the other aspect of like servanthood. What does unhealthy servanthood look like? Like what does that look like, and what does that heart posture look like in there?
Yeah, that's good. I think there's a line. Sorry. I get really excited when we're talking about boundaries. Talking about boundaries. I think there is a line between, hey, I'm gonna serve this person, or I'm going to meet this need, and hey, now this person's manipulating me, or they're using my desire to help them and to serve them for their own benefit. Galatians 1:10, it mentions, for am I now trying to persuade people or God, or am I striving to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. I would not be a slave of Christ. And Paul's writing this. He's saying, hey, like if I was trying to please people, then I wouldn't be a slave of Christ. Like I wouldn't be doing the things that Christ has called me to do obediently. And we have to be careful because, I mean, we do live in a fallen, sinful world, and there are people that even sometimes with the best intentions, they'll use our desire to serve and to meet needs for their own gain, just selfishly. And we can all fall into this trap if we're not careful. And so I think it's really important to understand that as a Christian, it is 100% okay to say no. I tell our college students, like in our leadership specifically, my goal isn't to fill your schedule with you doing things for the BCM. Like that's not my goal. That's not my desire. And if you're busy and swamped, like I'm not going to just kick you off the leadership team because it's like, oh man, Kyle, like I have this other thing I have that came up on a Thursday night, or I have this other thing I have to do on a Tuesday for Freshman Connection. It's like, I get it. You're busy. Like I understand. I'm not going to try and force you to do this one thing, but a lot of times as Christians, we struggle with that no word because we feel like, oh, well, hey, Christ is, I mean, he paid for my sins, like, so I have to give all of this back when somebody could be just manipulating us. And that's where I think spending time in the Word, but really being in tune with the Spirit and understanding, here's my schedule, here's what I can do, here's my limits, here's where I can go, to where if somebody asks me, hey, can you do this? Hey, no, I'm sorry, I can't. Like I'm sorry. Like I can put it out there, and I mean I have people all the time ask me, do you know anybody that want to serve, like a student that want to serve in this or intern in this? And it's like, hey, I'll let them know, but I can't force them to come and be an intern for you or be an interim worship pastor for you or do these things. And I'm pretty cautious about those things because I want our students that are called to ministry, like, to have good experiences. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to be overly cautious and protective because I know, again, with the best intentions, we can use people at times, and it can completely turn them away from ministry, from serving, from anything. And so we have to be really careful with that. So that's what I would say is like really being in tune with the Spirit and understanding that it is okay. And at times it is the most godly thing for you to do to tell somebody no.
Yeah.
I want to say something to leaders out there asking people, because yes, I think that those who are serving should have the ability to say no, but I think it's also there's some like responsibility on leaders to allow people to say no. Sometimes whenever we word things, we try to, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, like trap people into saying yes. Mm-hmm. And so like for me, whenever I ask people to do things for any of my ministries, like my first thing is like, hey, like I'm going to ask you to do something for me, but you have the right to say no. I just let them know straight off the bat, like, hey, I don't expect you to say yes. I'm asking you to do this favor for me for free. And if it doesn't fit your schedule, then hey, like, okay, that's fine. I can do without, I can ask someone else. And so we have to like, as leaders, make sure our mindset when we ask people is in the right place. Because it's very easy for us to like be like, oh, will you do this for me? And then just stare at them until they say yes. And like, that's not allowing them the space. And it's also being manipulative. And like, sometimes we do it subconsciously and sometimes we do it consciously, but we have to make sure that we're allowing our leaders the ability to say no.
Yeah. Well, it's easy, I think, as the person asking, at least for me, there are times where it's easy for, my sinful thoughts to be like, oh, well, they don't want to serve because of you, you know? And it's like, well, that's not necessarily, I mean, that could be true. And if it's true, like, okay, then maybe there's something that needs to be resolved there, but it's also like, that's not necessarily true. Like their schedule could be super busy. And so just understanding, hey, just because somebody's saying no doesn't mean they're rejecting you as a person, right? They may just be like, hey, it just doesn't fit. And so even for those leaders out there, like, I get it. It's hard when those students that you love, you just want to spend time with, you want to be around more, when they say, hey, I can't do that, I'm sorry, it doesn't work out. It's tough. But understand that they most likely don't hate you. Hopefully. They might, I don't know. So hopefully they don't hate you. Yeah. And then also, you know, just understand like this time may be super busy for them, but that doesn't mean there's an opportunity in the future for them to help you out. So
Yeah. Can I add something on that too? So with like even personal experience before, I found that like whenever I've been my most busiest and like I've said yes to so many things, and I've tried to be in service of others, and I did that well, and like I'm not saying that like it wasn't a good time in my life, but I found that when I was doing that, I found it being intimate with the Lord was very difficult, and finding that time to be intimate with the Lord was very difficult too, and that's the most important thing in your walk and in your faith is to have that time alone with the Lord and have that time growing in Him. And I know that saying yes to things and being a servant is good, but you have to find that line. So what does that like line look like?
Well, and I think kind of going off of what you said, and I remember we had this conversation back in Tulsa, like at the end of last semester, because we were talking about just busyness and how students just say yes to everything. Because a lot of the times the root issue is a pride problem because they think, and I mean, especially when I first started in ministry, like I would just say yes to everything. And I'd be like, yeah, like people want to like people want me to like teach here or like do this thing or lead this thing, and I was like, oh yeah, and then I was like, I have a pride problem. But it took me like a while to realize that, just in the sense of me thinking that my busyness was God glorifying, but ultimately it was just me satisfying my pride, and I mean, which is not God glorifying. And so I think the boundary in that is figuring out I think, again, just having intentional time with the Lord every day, and I mean, laying down your life and taking up your cross and simply just saying like, hey, Lord, like today, like before anything else, Lord, like you have my yes before these people. And I think that's just really important to have that mindset, like for the day and just, I mean, for the week and for the year and just for your life, to always give the Lord your yes before people. And I think that helps a lot. And I think also, I mean, as kind of simple as it sounds, keep a calendar and plan out your times that you're going to spend with the Lord. Plan out your times that you're going to do your homework, the times that you are going to serve on a Wednesday night or Sunday morning, the time that you're going to take to prep to serve if you're teaching somewhere. But always make sure that you put time in there to rest, and you have time that you guard and you protect in that. And that's something that I've had to do. And I've had to develop just, I mean, over the years, and I mean, even moving to Edmond and just saying like, hey, like, typically, like my like Friday mornings, like I go to a coffee shop and I have time with the Lord, like, and I don't do anything else. And I have to guard that time, and I don't say yes to anything else during that time. So I think that's just like a practical way to do that, to set that boundary, is to literally just keep a planner and guard that time, and also just remember just kind of your heart motive behind why you say yes to things, and also why you say no to things. Is it out of your pride and wanting to be busy, and just always remembering just what your motives behind why you do the things that you do.
I think that there's, on both sides of these equations, like for some people, you need to start saying no to things, and you need to start giving that time back to the Lord. Mm-hmm. But for other people who I call fake busy or pretend to be busy, mm-hmm. you need to start saying yes to certain opportunities and start actually serving the Lord instead of just like guarding your time to be your time. And so I think that like there's two sides of this coin, where some people are just like, those who are servers will just run into a brick wall until like they can't anymore. And for some of us, like we'll just sit on our couch and pretend like we're busy. And so we have to like be aware of our weaknesses, aware of our pride, and like decide like, okay, like I need to say yes to this opportunity even though I don't want to, and I need to say no to this opportunity even though I want to, and like weeding out what is what.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. Let's expand a little bit more on the pride issue behind this. So like where does that lay? Like why do we have that pride issue when it comes to this?
We're sinners.
I knew that one was coming.
Next question.
No, I mean, I think ultimately, and it can be different for each person, but I'm sure there's some of that to where we can, I mean, through social media, through all of these things, we can look and see people getting acknowledged for their stuff, or it's like, man, they have a lot of views or they have a lot of likes. When, if you really think about it, it's like people just scroll through their phone and just like everything, and they don't really pay attention to what it is. But anyway, that's a different thing. And so there's that just desire to kind of be at the front. Hey, we want to be acknowledged. And I mean, there are people that don't have that desire. You know, maybe they're a little more introverted. It's like, I don't really desire that. But they ultimately also want to be in control of their time to where they're going to appear busy, or they're going to be like, oh, no, I can't do that. I've got this thing. When really it's just, hey, I want to do what I want to do. And I think at the root of that is just this, like, kind of what we've said is pride, where it's like, hey, Lord, I know you've called me to this stuff, but I really want to be in charge and do what I want to do. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'll hand that over whenever I'm done with my time in college, or, you know, whenever I'm done and I have a wife and kids, like, and then we're kind of starting to, you know, we're settled and everything, then I'll give my time over to you maybe a little bit more. But really, I'm going to kind of keep hold of it. And it's rooted in a lot of things, you know. It's just kind of, and that's where I think, as Krista mentions, like figuring out, here's my schedule, here's my calendar. If you're a morning person or an evening person, figuring out those times that you can just be productive and do stuff, but also remembering, hey, I have to give the Lord my yes from the moment I wake up, you know, to go into sleep. Like, it all comes down to that. And if I am unwilling to give him my yes, then I'm unwilling to be obedient in serving in whatever he calls me to. Yeah. So then everything I do, whether I get acknowledged for it or not, will stem from selfishness.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay,
well, no, go ahead.
I was going to add, like, do you think, like, not having that yes and not intentionally putting that yes on the table, do you think that, like, stems to other things too? It's like it just starts in one place in life, but it grows from that. Do you think that happens? Like, I don't know. And do you think that's a possibility?
I'm sorry. I really was not tracking because I was trying to remember my thought. And Kyle looked at me like, can you have a... Okay, Kyle, can you please answer this one?
Tyson, do you want to answer? What do you think?
I think that in most things in our life, it works that way. I think that if we look at whatever sin struggle we struggle with, if we trace it back to the root or where it started, it now, and however long it's been, has a completely different mind of its own. So I think for most of our sin struggles, it starts with something simple. Some of us, it started before we were even Christians, and we just carried that baggage in with us. And like through the continuation of continuing to like say no to God and say yes to ourselves, it gets easier and easier to do that. So I think that whenever some of us who have struggled with getting involved in our churches and saying yes to serving, it becomes harder every time we say no to that opportunity to say yes the next time. And so I think that once again, we have to like lay down our pride and like be obedient to what the Lord's calling us to do. And so like for some of us, he's put on our hearts like, hey, you need to start serving my people in my church, and you need to step out in obedience and say yes and ask an awkward question. I remember whenever I asked if I wanted to serve on BCM leadership, and I hadn't been to BCM in like 2 years, and I was at a BCM event, and I was also elected president of Bucks at this time. But I was at a BCM event, and I felt the Lord calling me like to do stuff with the BCM, and so I just walk up to Paul and I go, "Hey, how do I be a part of this thing?" And Paul said, "Well, we got leadership applications opening up next week, and you can do that." And I was like, "All right, cool." But it was just that step. I mean, it was awkward. I was like, Paul hasn't seen me in probably maybe ever, and here I am just walking up to him and be like, "I want to serve." So it takes that step of obedience, like, okay, like, hey, let's be intentional and conscious in our efforts to serve the Lord and what he's calling us to do. We can't just let it pretend like it's just going to run in the background and it's just going to happen. We have to have a conversation with ourselves and be like, okay, Lord, yes, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to ask this person the question. I'm going to step out in obedience. And then just keep reminding ourselves and telling ourselves we're going to do it until we do it, if that makes sense.
No, I get that. Krista, what were you going to say?
Well, so I started thinking about this because think, again, going back to what I was saying, like at the beginning of all this, just inviting people with you to serve. And I don't know. I just think that's a very important thing. Just whenever it comes, I mean, even just to discipleship, because I mean, discipleship and service pretty much go hand in hand. But I think even just like a question you can ask yourself to kind of recognize if there is pride within the things that you do is kind of asking and evaluating, like, if I were not to be here, would my ministry continue on without me? And I'm not, and just in the sense of, even if you're not like in a full-time ministry position or anything, like you're ministering to, I mean, people on campus and the people that you're discipling. And if you were to, I mean, leave, like, have you continued these things within these people so that your ministry can continue on without you, because you haven't built it around yourself? Because I think you can build it around yourself a lot and become busy in that. And you miss the aspect of serving those around you because you're so busy serving yourself, making sure everything is built up around you and around your agenda and your plan, instead of, hey, I'm going to invite these people alongside with me so that we can go out and we can serve together. And I don't know, that was just a thought that I had, but yeah.
No, I think that's really good. Do you guys have anything else to add before we kind of close up?
I think just one thing is, obviously, we're focusing on like one specific topic and one specific branch of that topic, and talking about, just pride in those things. But we also, just need to recognize there are times when people have experienced hurt. Maybe they have been manipulated, maybe they have been used in those types of situations and areas. And so please don't hear us saying, hey, because you're not willing or you haven't healed yet through that between you and the Lord, and also just as you're walking through that with Him, and maybe even going through counseling with that, like that we're trying to say, hey, suck it up and serve regardless, right? I think there is a part of it where we need to understand, there are people that they experience things that we don't know. And so we just need to be mindful of that as well. So
yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you guys for talking about that and just sharing your thoughts. But thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out with us. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll be having another awesome discussion. And if you want more information or want to ask us a question, make sure to follow us on Instagram at UCOBCM.